So we're going to hit the ground running a little bit. I got to review each time because otherwise it won't make sense, and we're moving right along here. The one part of life you can't escape, but which way will you go? And initially I wasn't planning on a long drawn-out series, but apparently it's a long drawn-out series. This is our third time only together, and I thank the Lord for it, but it's something that I think that we need to think about as believers in Jesus Christ, but more than that. Am I losing? No. Oh, I did. I lost signal. Oh, now it's back. I don't know. I'll try not to get too distracted if it keeps blinking in and out. But it's something that is good to communicate to others as well. In terms of our witness to Jesus Christ and what he has accomplished and the nature of things in this world, it is good for us to have a grasp on these things so that we might engage others and be able to speak intelligently with those around us. And I think it's very important that we are able to do so because we are exhorted and commanded by Peter to make a defense, right, in regard to the hope within us. This covers some of that material in how to do that in a lost and dying world. Everyone shares these kinds of things, whether they embrace them or not consciously, but we wrestle through these various issues. We peeked at the end of the book, didn't we? And we looked at Genesis 1, 26 to 28. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness, so that as you sit there, you are an image bearer. Remember, very important, that you are a creature, but you are an image bearer. And it's not like you can somehow use spiritual tongs and sort of pluck out the image. You are the image of God. In Matthew 6:33, we see the issue of priority. It is a statement of priority. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and then all these other things will be added to you. In Romans 1, 18 through 28, the key phrase, at least in my mind, is in verse 21. And when we get farther along, we'll bring out some more of this. For even though knowing God, even though they knew God, pardon me, they did not honor him as God or give thanks. That's the two key things. Humanity has a record of rejecting the idea that we need to honor God and give him thanks, even though on some level we know him. And they have rejected that. We have rejected that as humanity. We talked about the three great exchanges. In Romans 12, 1 and 2, we find the reversal. The reorientation of worship, if you will, because of the mercies of God. We are to present our bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual or reasonable service of worship. Romans 1 then showed us how we exchange the truth of God for the lie and turn from worshiping the true God to some form of the creature. In Romans 12, we are now reversing that. No longer are we creaturely focused, we are now creator focused. We are worshiping him more than the creature. So we began by asking about motivation. What makes you tick? What motivates you? What drives you? What do you build your life around or upon? And what are your greatest hopes and dreams? And do you still have hopes and dreams in your life even now. We ask the question, what might be important to people in general? We weren't seeking the wrongness or rightness. We just wanted to know, what is it that out there that you have heard that people have said? Family, money, job, charity, sports. People live or die with their favorite team. Partying, pleasure seeking, a who cares attitude about life. Hobby, God, church. Back when I was a teenager, and even before, in the 60s and early 70s, the big phrase, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We asked, how do you think they arrive at their answer? Well, they may have been taught explicitly by a parent, friend, teacher, or professor. We said, or it was mentioned, the school of hard knocks. They observed perhaps what others were doing, what others treated as important. They may have said one thing, but they were doing something else, and that is observed, and they embraced that, and they said, well, if that's right for them to do that, then I can do it. So instead of being taught, they are caught. They caught things. And so as a result, we come to speak of priorities, what we deem as important. And where do they arise? From where do they arise? And we begin to see this as a value judgment. And people develop in their thinking, that is, they come unto their own in terms of their thinking. And again, having been taught by parents and friends and teachers and professors in the school of hard knocks, they start putting things together and arrive at some conclusions. And then people develop their convictions, firmly held beliefs. These are the things that I will not move from. Some of these other things out here I might move away from, I might rearrange, I might get rid of something, add something else. But these firmly held beliefs at the center of the wheel, so to speak, are those things that I hold firmly to, and they are my convictions. I may not always be able to say what they are, but I have them nevertheless. And they grow in understanding and what that will help them achieve their goals or priorities. And they come to conclusions over what is important. From there, they develop more priorities. And maybe what helps them get along in life, whatever that might mean. But unfortunately, we said, not everyone succeeds. Some people embrace priorities that run counter to family or what teachers have said. They develop a rebellious streak in themselves and society at large. And for some, life is merely pointless, and they live that way. They live intentionally or otherwise a destructive lifestyle. Because in their mind, they have arrived at the conclusion that life is not worth anything. And there is nothing to life. And that brings us to what we've been driving to. How do they know if the priorities established are good or bad? How do they know if the priorities established are good or bad? I want you to remember something here. I'm sorry about that. We might have to reset it the old way, Alan, for next time. I could do this. Let's see here. This might work if I just hook this up and I have a direct connection. That might at least get you seeing what. Now, what I'm seeing. That's not what I wanted. I wanted that. This may not, something happened. So hopefully you will stay with me there. And we are not on, what are we fundamentally? We are on, how do we know? How do they know if the priorities established are good or bad? Remember knowledge. How do we know? Knowledge is, philosophers talk this way. They talk about knowledge being justified true belief. If I see a statement, right, and I know it, then I must believe it to be true, and I have some sort of justification for it. And we call that knowledge. And knowledge has three aspects to it, and we've demonstrated that before in the Scriptures. There is intellectual knowledge. There is experiential knowledge that is applicable, practical. Not only do I intellectually know about something, but I know how to take it apart and put it back together, so to speak. I am practiced in something. I can take the carburetor off the car, not that there are carburetors around too much anymore. I can get the kit, I can rebuild it, I can put it back on. That's that experiential, practical knowledge. Then there is relational knowledge. That's why we often say, when we talk to someone, do you have a relationship with the Lord? Not just, do you have a knowledge about God or the Lord Jesus Christ? But do you have a relationship with Him? That is, does your knowledge meet the criteria of relationship? Because that's what we're after. We want people to have a relationship with the Lord. In certain cases, if their values match their family values, there is an assumption then that they are good. How do I know if my priorities are good? Well, if I was taught by my mom and dad, this is good, this is bad, and I embrace that, then as I grow up, I'm older, I might say, well, yeah, that's how I know, because mom and dad taught me this is the way of life. This is what is good and this is what is bad. In other cases, if their values match the prevailing values of society, then they are deemed good. If society says in a sort of mass sort of way that this is acceptable, and if somebody believes that or embraces that, then they say, well, sure, then yes, I've achieved that. I know that it is good or right because that's what society says. My teachers, you can add that in. That's what I've learned through the school of hard knocks and so on. There are two problems. There are two problems, at least two, that I see here that are very important to understand. Problem number one, what if those family values or societal values change in any way, shape, manner, or form? So you have society that says X is good. And then later on, society says, no, X is no longer good. Now we embrace Y, or the family, or so on. Now, I don't know why that just happened. Technology. I should learn not to touch it. The issue then, what once was thought of as acceptable no longer is, and that which was unacceptable is now mainstreamed. But now there's a sub-problem to that. A person may be stuck in his or her ways, right? Well, that's the way I've always held it to be. Now, society is saying, no, that was all wrong. And depending on how old I am, in my 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, now all of a sudden, you see, society is asking me to change my most firmly held beliefs about things. They're not simply asking me to change something out here. They may think they are. But what's out here has to be consistent with what I hold dearly in my heart. And I run into trouble when society or teachers or professors say, no, that's all wrong. You have got to change fundamentally. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. And in fact, beloved, that's why it's hard to reach others for Jesus Christ. Because you are asking them to give up firmly held convictions that they've had over a lifetime. I mean, think about it. If you don't conform now, you are deemed bad or behind the times or evil. Problem number 2. So problem 1, what if those family values or societal values change in any way, shape, or form? Problem number 2, it is arbitrary and inconsistent. Arbitrary and inconsistent, the two greatest sins of thought you can have in terms of discussion or argumentation or debate, being arbitrary and inconsistent. Let me give you, I'm going to give you all 3 examples. Example number 1, transgenderism. And we're running into problems now already with the signature of the President of the United States. Everything now, in terms of an executive order, everything is supposed to change now. Female athletes are now asked to compete with males who identify as female in sports. Gender was considered biological. Male, female, man, woman, boy, girl. By science. Now it is a determination by anyone willing to do so. We used to call it, I don't even know if it's a term that's even used anymore, gender dysphoria. Somebody thinking that they're a girl in a boy's body, or a boy in a girl's body, or vice versa. One determines that even though one is biologically a male, yet can identify as a woman, but not just a woman, but as something else entirely. So now I can say and make a demand on your life that says, no, call me they or them, because I'm whatever gender. I mean, there's all sorts of them now. And if you don't conform, then you are bad. There's nothing wrong with me, it is you. And what has happened? A president can sign an executive order and change it all around with implications for the use of showers, bathrooms in general, athletics, and so on. And not only that, 5, maybe even younger, but at least 5 to 8-year-old range can now determine their own gender. Their brains aren't even developed. But now we are giving the authority to be able to identify to a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and so on. What makes them capable? What science do they base that on? Even though they say they embrace science, what science do they base that on? By what authority do they act that way? What kind of authority do they take unto themselves to be able to say something in such a way to say, you have to change your firmly held beliefs and convictions in life? It is no longer man and woman or male and female. We experienced this years ago, the redefining of marriage. Marriage was always thought of as a man and a woman, between a man and a woman. But now it has changed. Anyone in a loving relationship can have any partner they want, and now they're butting up against the idea of multiple wives, multiple husbands, animals, objects, and so on. And you have a poor person here, and I don't mean that financially necessarily, but you have a person here who doesn't seem to get along with other human beings and has developed a relationship, so to speak, with their computer and gaming and social media. And they say, well, this is the thing that I get through life with. Because I love it, why can't I marry it? You got to do it. And where does it end? And we're being asked to change our firmly held convictions and beliefs about these things. How about freedom of speech? Freedom of speech. What we have been seeing lately to an even greater degree now is that now I can demand that you be canceled if what you are saying or believing doesn't match up with the prevailing, acceptable, received values of society or perceived values of society. So now a company can just simply cancel you, and there's a little incongruity there. I talked about being arbitrary and inconsistent. A world leader from a particular area of the world can say how he wants to destroy Israel or the United States and how they're going to do it, and he's okay, but another leader of the world is totally canceled and taken off completely. And you might say, well, I agree with that. But you see, that isn't the nature of free speech. That's First Amendment, God guaranteed, not government guaranteed, God guaranteed basic fundamental rights of human beings. But if I don't say something the right way, I'm gone. Just over the weekend, I noticed a couple of people who were canceled, fired for what had previously been said. The host of a popular TV series and an actor in a particular program, gone. Because they didn't say what they were supposed to say in today's society, or say it how it was supposed to be said in today's society. So now, he who controls Twitter or YouTube or Facebook controls information. And more than that, they control what is acceptable. And don't kid yourself. If you begin to, let's say, open a YouTube channel and begin to speak just out of the Scriptures, about what the Scriptures say about various things that society touches on and has now changed, you will be canceled. What are your firmly held beliefs? Now, I need to note one other thing here before I move on to the next question, and I think I'll be able to start the next question. What are we fundamentally? It must be noted that the nature of these various kinds of arguments over what is right, wrong, acceptable, unacceptable, gender identity, marriage, even climate change, these are worldview issues. And worldview issues are not the kind of an issue where a teacher of mine once said in a debate, he said, a worldview discussion and debate is not the kind of thing where you can do the crackers in the pantry sort of thing. It's not like you can just walk over to the closet, open the door, and see if they're in there or not. It is a worldview issue that deal with firmly held convictions and beliefs in one's life. I mean, let me just give you a for instance and climate change. What temperature should the world be? Now, if it were Franklin, I don't know, what were you going to say? Like 85? 85. Lisa? Not so much. 85, she'd say, Franklin, that's too hot. It's got to be a nice, 68. Somebody else might say, no, 75. Where should ice be? How far down should it go? Well, according to secular thinking in history, Ice Age expands and advances, right? And then it drew back. How far should it draw back? Who is to say how far ice should be removed? That's how you know it's a worldview issue. Now they'll say, you got to follow the science, and I'm all for embracing the scientific process. But you have to differentiate between what science can do through observation and human interaction with that information, and what human beings seek to do with that information. I hope you understand the difference. Think clearly about these things. When someone begins to ask you about, well, science says the globe is warming. Okay, it's warming. Well, yeah, but if it warms too much and changes too much, then it'll all be different and we'll have to adjust. And then you just say, well, aren't you an evolutionist? And isn't that what creatures, organisms have always done? Adjusted, adapted? You see how that goes? Well, I have a whole lot more that could be said about that, but I'm going to refrain. Let's begin to tackle the next question, because it goes hand in glove with what you believe. What are we fundamentally? What are we fundamentally? What are we? B.F. Skinner said we are animals to be trained. He said, give me your children from birth. I'll put them in my Skinner box, so to speak, and I will make them be whatever we want them to be. We're animals, just to be trained. But notice, one animal was saying he would train the other animals. What gives this animal the right to have any say over another animal? But that's another story. operant conditioning, using negative and positive reinforcements, and so on. Some say we are secular humanists who are at the height or top of the chain, so to speak. Carl Rogers was a psychologist who was a humanist who said that humanity has the good inside them and the capability inside them to solve any of man's problems, any of your individual problems. It's all there within you, and I'm here to help bring that out so that you can solve the problems you are facing, the trouble you are facing. All the needed resources for life are within us, and we just have to learn how to tap into them. Is there purpose or priority? You have to determine it. What purpose? We are what we make ourselves out to be. There is no point at all, and I've heard in debates evolutionists simply admit this, in evolutionary thinking, naturalism, that is, no God at all, materialism only, there is no overriding purpose of life. You have to make your own. But what if the purpose I want to live for goes against society? Who is to say? The mob? The majority? What gives them the right to be able to say that? There is no point at all except what we make of things. Evolutionists, strictly speaking, say we are organisms among many organisms. We are all equally valid and just trying to be fit to survive. Right? Survival of the fittest. Can I adapt to the environment around me? That's the big thing. Those who could not, those organisms that could not adapt, died off. Strangely, we seek to try and save organisms because they're having trouble adapting and surviving in today's climate and world. Climate not in terms of weather, but in today's world. And we think they should survive, yet an evolutionist would say, if he's consistent, right? Remember? Arbitrary and inconsistent. It's inconsistent for the evolutionist to say, well, all these other organisms should survive as well. If he can't survive, isn't that part of the evolutionary process? That's right, it is. And so it is time to face the facts. We are not all cracked up to be what some make us out to be. Nihilism, Nietzsche. There's no purpose, there's no order, there's no reason to pursue these things. Purposelessness. We are born, we live in a limited fashion, and we die, never to be heard from again. We are insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and there is no point at all. And yet we see humanity doing what? Trying to figure out their place in the world. You might know of someone. I got to find myself. I got to find my place in the world. I got to find my purpose. I got to do something. I don't know what I'm doing and I need help here. Well, why? I wish I had time to continue to move on. Next time we are going to then ask the question, why does it matter what we are fundamentally? Why does that matter? And it's important that you understand this from the last question. What are we fundamentally? Why does it matter what we are fundamentally? So we'll review that in a little more detail next time. And because of who or what we are, fundamental to our existence is what? fundamental, what is most basic in terms of our existence? We're going to answer that question. What is the real problem? What is the solution? And then ask finally, which way will you go? So we're making headway, and we're going to get there. And thank you for your patience through all this. But it's just very important that we understand these things about what's going on in society, what's going on in the world around us. And maybe it will give us some avenue of a means of addressing some of these things with those we rub shoulders with, those we know, to do so in a humble manner, a humble yet bold manner of being able to speak to these things. So I don't know how much you talk about different things. Once in a while, I'll have conversations. Well, actually, let me just end with this. Before we left to go help Lisa's dad, I had to take the car in because I was going to milk the tires, so to speak, because, they're really close. And then we went on that trip because Lisa's mom passed, and then we're going back again, and then in April we're heading back. We always take my car, and so I thought, well, I just got to get tires. So I went in to get tires, and through various ways in which the Lord brought things about, and in His providence, the guy behind the counter asked me, said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a pastor. And then he asked, well, what do you think about all this stuff going on? Right? I mean, talk about a door opening like as wide as possible. How much time do you have? So we began to engage in a conversation about these very things. I pray it was productive in his life and in the other guy's life. And you never know where opportunities will arise. Just chatting. And not trying to be forceful about it. You should be, because then you're acting like everybody else. Instead, why do you hold to this? Or you might jokingly say on a day like today to your neighbor, if you even step outside, right? Boy, global warming, who needs it? And you can have a laugh about it, and then pretty soon you can engage in a conversation about it. Is it science only, or is there a worldview involved in it? See, and you can get that conversation going just by asking some questions. Just by asking some questions. Father in heaven, we thank you for your word, that we are able to look at these passages and sort of look at the back of the book, so to speak, and draw these out as we tackle these questions that everyone really deals with in life. And so we ask, Lord, that you would help us. You would help us to continue to be alert to and aware of our surroundings and the goings-on around us, that we might faithfully engage society, that we might faithfully engage those around us to maybe challenge some of these firmly held beliefs and convictions, to know why we stand where we stand on the truths of your word, to humbly yet boldly address these various things. And Lord, as you help us, and work through us and in us, we will give you all the glory and the honor and the praise through Christ our Lord. Amen.